fate has just tied them so closely together that you're like, no, you can't escape. You can't escape.
Ah, banana bread.
Welcome. You're listening to Nuditea, a podcast where we get naked with our feelings while drinking tea. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Wendy, and on this podcast we talk about life, love, adult feelings. Sometimes we talk about, recent movies that we've seen. This episode is about recent movies that we've seen.
There's nothing specific that we ever talk about. It's whatever whim we have, whatever we want to talk about, we talk about. So you can't categorize us.
No. I don't want to limit ourselves, okay?
We are limitless.
Yes. Recently, we've watched two movies by, is it director-animator? Makoto Shinkai, the producer-director-animator of the movies Your Name and Weathering with You. And we just wanted to give our first impressions for Kim, I think one of them second impressions and feelings and thoughts. But let's start with what teas we're drinking.
Wendy poured me some peppermint tea. She made me some peppermint tea because I'm having some digestive problems.
Yes.
So she's just assisting me, and it tastes like peppermint. Tastes good.
I made it real strong. Enjoy it.
Nice.
I am having a Hong Kong milk tea. The tea is an orange pekoe from the brand Yorkshire Gold, which I think is the best brand if you want to make Hong Kong style milk teas at home. Because it's British. Let's start. Basically, Kim is going to take the reins for this one for the majority because I feel like she has many more feelings about these movies than I do. She made a very long Google Doc.
I like to think I'm analytical, but again, I'm no expert at any of this, but these are just my thoughts and feelings and things I've noticed while watching it.
Yeah, and if I was taking the reins on this episode of the podcast, my feelings would be, I liked both of them, and that would be it.
So
go, Kim, go.
Yeah, we're gonna start with spoiler warning.
Oh, yeah.
So if you haven't seen Your Name or Weathering with You, which is out in theaters, by the time we're recording, it'll probably be out by the time we actually post. But we're gonna be talking all about them, and we're not avoiding any spoilers because you can't really talk about it in depth unless you get into the meat of it. So
yeah,
that's your warning. Whatever.
Deal with it.
Go watch them because they're really good.
Yeah.
So we're also going to start with a brief synopsis of both. So you guys kind of, if you decide to listen to this, even though you haven't seen it, you'll kind of know what we're talking about. So Your Name came out in 2016. It's about a 17-year-old girl called Mitsuha. Lives in a rural town in Japan called Itomori. I was actually saying these right. Better.
Itomori. Thank you.
And she's switching bodies with a 17-year-old boy called Taki. He's from Tokyo, and they're switching bodies when they go to sleep. And this happens...
Taki.
Roomba.
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so they do that like a few times each week for about a month. And then Weathering with You is a 16-year-old boy, Hokada, who escapes his rural island town to start a new life in Tokyo, which is experiencing abnormal rainfall. During his struggles to make a living, he meets Hina, who has the power to stop the rain, also known as the Sunshine Girl. That's very brief.
That's actually a very no spoiler synopsis of each.
Because we're going to go in depth about it.
Yes.
But that's just like a little taste if you're trying to
decide if you want to see it. And it might not be everyone's thing. Anime isn't really everyone's thing, but based on our experience, people who may not like this genre of anime or are not into anime in general have been pleasantly surprised by the movie. So we super recommend, because we're super biased, to give it a shot, even if it doesn't sound like something that you'd be into. Because it's like one of those... Both of them are like really deep, soul feeling, feel good movies. So I feel like that's relevant to everyone.
If you like some love story with a little bit extra added in to a love story, these are what these are, basically. Because like my overall impressions on both, so I love both of them. The animation is just spectacular. We'll get more into that in a bit. But the soundtracks complement the scenes and the animation so well that it's up there with like breaking, oh my goodness, it's up there with Pride and Prejudice and its soundtrack complementing the cinematography of it all. And
Were you gonna say Breaking Bad before?
I was gonna say Breaking Dawn. I don't know.
Is that a Twilight film?
There's a song on the soundtrack called Dawn, and then I don't know why I would say breaking. You're gonna cut all this out. That's why I repeated.
No, this is gonna stay in now.
Well, I'm gonna cut it out. So it's just on the same level of I've been listening to it a bunch, and you can just picture the whole movie again. It's great. And then the balance of comedy with like impactful emotional moments is just so good. It's mwah. It's perfect. Oh, I'm a big fan that even though they're like love stories at their core, they do tie in like a mythical aspect or science fiction aspect, and I just think it just adds a little more layers to the story in general. But yeah.
Okay, so was that your first impressions, or did you have more first impressions?
No, those are my first impressions. That was like my, in a nutshell, these are what I feel about the movies, and now we're gonna go more in depth.
Okay.
About things.
Okay.
Okay.
So, again, I have way less thoughts about all of this than Kim does, so I'm going to keep mine sweet and short, so Kim really has the opportunity to, like, get her feelings out. But essentially, obviously, if you couldn't tell already, I really enjoyed both of these animated films. And I think for me, I really enjoyed the present story in Weathering with You, as in I was very involved in the plot throughout the movie. But I felt like with Your Name, although obviously I enjoyed the storyline, I was had all of these other background questions that I really wanted to get answered that I think kind of made me a little distracted from the main plot line that was going on. I really wanted like more out of Your Name. I really wanted to know more about the history, the mythology behind all of it, because they hinted at many of those things but never really answered any questions, which I think is really great. But now my curiosity has been piqued and I really want to know. You mentioned that you really enjoyed how romantic love plays a role in these movies, and it's kind of like the central plot line, but there's a lot of other things happening. This has been kind of an ongoing feeling with me, but I just wish people could just get rid of romantic love plot lines altogether, because I almost didn't feel like either of these movies needed them.
Right.
Or even if they didn't make it so obvious that this was headed towards love. Like maybe the characters didn't have to be so involved with each other in that way and just have really strong feelings for each other because of this kind of fate-like emotional connection, and start out with a really strong relationship that's based in friendship that you could potentially see moving towards romantic love in the future, but is not really touched on in the films.
I think love drives both male protagonists' actions a lot. Without it, I'm not sure I'm not sure Taki would have maybe taken that step to find out, to go looking for Mitsuha.
That's what I mean, though. I know it's very cliche of females in these kind of romantic roles to be very emotionally attached and involved with whoever their interest is, but why can't it be the other way around? Like, I don't understand why guys can't become emotionally attached to someone that they have yet to fall in love with. Like, why does it have to be like, oh, they only are able to cross these boundaries to really go the extra mile because they're in love with this person romantically? Why can't it just be like, no, they're really, really attached to this person because it's this person, and because they've gone through certain things together and they've had this bond that hasn't quite reached a romantic bond. So I don't know, I think I've just seen so many, especially in anime, those like
You've seen way more
relationships that just go straight into like, oh, they have feelings for each other, and it's so obvious that it's going to be a romantic love line situation that I'm just like, people have other relationships, you know? Like I have a lot of guy friends that I would really like do a lot for, not because I'm like romantically interested in them because I'm married, but like because I really like them as people, and because I think that they're amazing people that's worth my time and effort for, you know, in any way that I can help them. So I'm just like much more interested in seeing relationships outside of a love line plot.
That's fair. Do you think in Weathering with You, when he decided to help Hina to find that job and make money so that she could survive with her brothers, do you think that was initially because he was in love with her right then? Because I think it was a little bit afterwards. See, we talked about this, and we think Weathering with You has a little more of a realistic, or you can really see it unfolding love story, and you believe it a little bit more than I think in Your Name. So he gets to the love point way sooner than I think she does. Because they're on top of that building when the fireworks are going off, and she's like, I love this job. And there was like this point where I think he thought she was gonna be like, I love you. I love you. And I think he even kind of set it up in the audience. Like, I was all like, is she about to say that she loves him? But in the end, she's like, I love bringing joy to people. I love this aspect. Thank you for pushing me to do this. Yeah. And so I think near the end of the movie, she realizes her feelings. And I do like that you're like, yeah, guys, for some reason, they don't pursue or do these grand gestures of friendship unless there's that that emotional, like, love attachment to it.
Which is really unfair. Like, give guys a bit more credit. They're either this kind of pure love, which is really sweet to watch, or they're like absolute scumbags, and it's just like, you know, there's guys that are just like in between. They're doing all these great things for the women in their life without being romantically involved with them. So I would like to see more of that. But again, back to Weathering with You, I think in the beginning he was doing all of these things because he liked Hina as a person, and
I think he was looking for just human attachment.
Yeah. Yeah.
He'd just come to a new city. He really knows no one except for his boss at this point. She gave him a burger. It was probably also a little bit of a, you really helped me out, I want to help you out, and that kind of feel. Yeah.
Just an extra little note on my thoughts for the animation style. This animation style has been coming up more and more in the world of animation in Japan, where they've got this kind of beautiful, almost romantic, hazy look to especially those like wide panning landscape type shots. Especially we see that in the city. In Your Name we see it in the countryside. It's just everything's a little bit fuzzy, but there's bits and pieces of detail enough that you get a sense of like what you would see yourself if you were there, because like our perspective, yeah, you like sweep across a landscape and you catch little details, but everything else is kind of like hazy in your memory, and it's a very nostalgic type of animation because it almost feels like, oh, this is a place that is familiar to me, which is really beautiful to me. But then also the things that really matter to the audience, the animators have done in exquisite detail, which is just amazing. It's like the contrast between these faded memory type shots, or I guess scenes, and these very sharp moments where you're very focused on a certain part of the screen or a certain scene in the film. So I think that was one of my favorite things about the animation. I think it was just really well done.
I think I also just enjoyed the colors that they ended up choosing, and nothing really feels flat unless it's supposed to feel flat. Yeah. When in Weathering with You, in the alleyways, when he goes to like help her out and save her from basically selling herself.
Say that, but it's just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
It really took such a dark turn, because if we remember, she's what, 15?
Well, at this point, you don't know what her age is. Yeah. And she actually says she's almost 18 to him, and that's what you believe kind of throughout the whole movie. But at this point, she's like just turning 15, I think. Like her birthday's the same, but she's turning 15, and it's really, really messed up. But I think we'll get to that. If you're talking about animation, I want to talk about the animation just a tiny bit before we get into our favorite scenes, because I think a lot of our favorite scenes are tied with the animation and just like what they did with it. But I don't know. I think this is what animation, or really good animation's doing. They're blending this computer generated like 2D animation with, it feels like the characters are still hand drawn. I'm not exactly sure if that's still true, or whether they're using the computer to make it just look hand drawn, but if it's easier to animate that. And I think that's really cool. Like Tokyo, having been there, it feels like Tokyo. And also in Your Name, Itomori, it just feels so countryside, and it feels like serene, and you're a little bit like, Mitsuha, like, why are you wanting to get out of here? It's too beautiful, but I get it, suffocating and whatnot. But I think this kind of computer animation where you can still make it look like it's beautiful 2D, but the cinematography you're able to get with that, like going around buildings, and I feel like you get more dynamic shots with what like animation has become and done, which is amazing. I also think the food is very reminiscent of what Studio Ghibli was kind of producing food-wise, and it just looks so good. They don't miss a beat there. The coloring is amazing. The sky, particularly in Your Name, the color choices, the clouds, it's so detailed when it doesn't even really need to be, with the meteor falling. Like, that's just something else. The night skies, so good. And then they up their game with water in Weathering With You, because water is a big aspect of Weathering With You, because it's raining all the time. She's praying it away. Just what they do with it is so, and it's supposed to be very mythological feeling, and so what they did with it, just, it makes it feel that way. Maybe with where technology has come with animation, it's easier, or more likely people are going to add those background details. When you rewatch, I've actually rewatched Your Name probably 4 times now.
Oh,
I'm not gonna
boy.
lie.
Okay.
It's an easy watch, and it's like you pick up new things every single time. I'd probably be watching Weathering With You more times if it wasn't just in theaters. But when you look at their rooms, like, there's just so much there. And again, like the Tokyo landscape, there's just so much detail in those buildings, which don't really need to, like, probably 10 years ago wouldn't have necessarily been focused on, because you only have so much time, so many resources. And so the details they choose, and again, the shots they choose, like, I love when they're doing the braided cord shots, and like the sound that's in there too. It's just the things they choose to do close-ups on, and the opening and closing of doors. It's a constant, like, callback or something, because every time they open or close, like, a subway door or a, like, house door, you're always focusing in on it opening and closing. I don't know why that choice was there, but there's just deliberate choices that are just gorgeous.
I feel like that was deliberately done, because some scenes look very faded, as if it's kind of like your own memory is there. But then other scenes, like if we were at a subway stop and we wanted to get on the train or off the train, the door is what we're focusing on. So it's like, it feels like a very natural animation, where it's like your perspective is where it should be if you were a part of this scene, and everything else is just kind of, it's faded and it's not quite in your perspective. It's just the way that you look at the world as well. So I think now that we've talked about it, it makes sense to me why they've decided to focus on certain things and leave other things hazy. It just brings you in.
I like your hazy aspect, because, like, while I was probably noticing that, I didn't really clue in the whole haziness, and it adds to where your eyes are focusing and what's important to your eyes. Very true, Wendy. So did you want to move on to what we think underlining, like, messages of the movie, or what the takeaways, I guess, were supposed to be of it?
Sure. And I think you have a lot to say. So again, I'm going to try and keep it very simple. Essentially, for Your Name, I really liked the aspect of having a strong sense of confidence in a very elusive type of fate. It's whether or not you believe in you're destined for a certain fate, and having confidence that you will reach a certain point where you will fulfill some sort of destined fate, but also having the same confidence in yourself that if that is not the fate that you want, you can always do certain things to be able to change that. So it's like, believe in yourself either way, man. Just whatever you think is right for you, then try to pursue that. Because I think in Your Name, all of the characters reach a certain point where they're like, I can't do this. If I was the other person, would they have been able to do this? And this is what I need to do, but I just can't seem to accomplish it. But they do. Yeah. They do persevere, and they do reach their goals in the end. And there's like a crazy flip-flop, but like the end goal is achieved, and I think that's really great to see. And I also think that if a guy and a girl did switch bodies, I feel like there would be just so much self-touching.
The fact that he's always touching her like
Boobs.
her boobs in the mornings, and like there's even a point where he's like, maybe I shouldn't, but he does it anyway. Like,
Yeah.
that's obviously what would be happening.
Yeah, all the time. And I think it's really funny because from the girl's perspective, when she wakes up in Taki's body, she's like very shy and it's just like, oh my god, like, how do I go to the bathroom? And it's true in Japanese and a lot of other Asian cultures. When you're younger, this is probably a bit skewed now, but back in the day when you were younger, like the other sex, their body was a very
Mystery?
taboo thing to think about, and to like suddenly be in the body of a male would be very freakish. But I'm like, girl, you definitely went ahead and tried like drawing cursive with your penis, like I'm sure she got over it eventually. So I just thought it was very funny that they added a bit of comedy related to, you know, the switching
The shock
body.
of like, what would you do if you were in the other gender's body? No, 100%.
Yeah, but it's just like thinking about all the other things off screen, quote unquote, that could have or probably did happen, just is hilarious to me.
Because I was trying to find the timeline. It is a month that they're switching and stuff like that. So we don't even touch upon, which I don't expect this movie to, but like her having her period, she would have to like have something written down, be like, when this happens, this is what you have to do, because like, what do you do with
Leaks
that?
everywhere.
Also, like morning erections. Like, she would have to deal with that, or like be like, what the fuck do I do with like that now, and all that stuff. So.
Yeah. So I just thought that was hilarious. Do you want to give thoughts
Sure,
on
for
your
your
name first before we move on to Weathering with You?
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways is the heart remembers long after the mind's forgotten. Because the whole point is they switch bodies, and then when they switch back, they kind of forget everything. It's a lot like a dream. It's not a memory, but there's this lasting, lingering feel, and it follows them throughout their life, even years and years after the main event, which we'll end up talking about, which would separate them from ever having to switch bodies again. And they always have this lingering feeling. And so I think that has to do with more the heart. And obviously the heart is the brain at the same time, but I think you can kind of separate them and talk about them in a
But I mean,
different way.
that's the point of these kind of mythical, almost a magic component to these animes. It's like you always have something to believe in that you would probably never believe in real life. It's just that when you're really a part of this anime, when you're watching it, you really believe in that, and you see it happen. So obviously you believe it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really enjoyable.
Other questions that I guess people might have, like, be like, making meaningful, lasting connection, what does that look like? If we're going through this like reincarnation or like soulmate type thing, what is a lasting connection? Because they don't actually ever meet up until one point in the movie, but they, through switching bodies and kind of going through each other's lives and walking in each other's shoes, they fall in love with each other, which is again why I don't necessarily like fully believe the love story. But if you're someone who believes in soulmates, I think that's a real thing. And can lasting connections be made just with being exposed to this person's life?
But I mean, they were also kind of texting and leaving each other messages. So part of me is like,
get, like, their
it's kind of
humor.
like they were going through a long distance relationship.
That's true.
Through the messages on their phone. So I don't know. I agree with you. I still feel like it would have been very hard for them to develop that deep of a romantic bond through those messages alone. But I think it's also mostly like the whole craziness of switching bodies and being in someone else's life also creates a bond that is not necessarily romantic, but just it makes you understand the person so well. So I think that has a lot to do with their love.
Well, I was joking, or like during when we were watching the movie, and I'm all like, I think that Mitsuha will just end up getting together with the girl that Taki is like has a crush
The
on.
Nissan at the restaurant.
Yeah, Okudura. I
Don't
think.
remember.
Okudura, I think. Because she ends up spending a lot of time with her and going on like a coffee date and stuff like that. So I joked them all like, Taki's not the real soulmate. She's gonna end up with the other girl.
It's the restaurant waitress girl.
But no, it's strong connection. You figure out it's even stronger when you find out essentially they are 3 years apart in their timeline. Which is a big, like, shocker. The point of the movie, we're like, oh, you think they're both 17 at the same time. It turns out that when she's 17, he's 14. But how time works, it can be unraveled, and time travel kind of happens.
If you've seen the movie, you know.
You know, yeah.
If you know, you know.
You know. So the idea that this connection was made despite time and all that is another powerful indicator that they're soulmates. They'll probably end up together. So the fact that they don't find other people, it makes sense. Basically.
But I mean, also it's because you mentioned this before, even after their memories were wiped out, they always felt like in their heart they were looking for something and they just didn't know what. So I think it's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard for you to focus on like present relationships or like going out on Tinder and putting yourself out there if you always feel like you're already busy looking for whatever it is you're looking for and you're trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So I think a part of it is fate has just tied them so closely together that you're like, no, you can't escape. Okay. So did you want to start for Weathering with You, or should I?
Sure, I can start with Weathering. Okay.
Good.
So,
because my notes were like, not much to add to Kim's point, so you have to go first.
So kind of the main, I guess, takeaway message I got from Weathering with You is the sacrifice of an individual for the greater good of humanity worth it? Does their choice to sacrifice themselves or not actually change what happens? What does sacrifice look like in a forever evolving and advancing society that's rapidly changing? Would that sacrifice have a lasting effect that it would have, like, 20 years ago or whatever? Because in the movie, there's an underlining climate change.
Heavy undertones of climate change, disaster warnings.
Yeah. And Tokyo is experiencing crazy rain, like, all the time. And as Hina is the sunshine girl, she can pray and then make brief moments of sunlight. Anyway, so as this is happening, the weather's getting worse and worse. Whether that's because she's praying and removing the rain and it comes back worse, or just because climate change is shit and is going to get worse. There's a mythological background to it of the weather maiden. She has to eventually sacrifice herself in order to return weather to normal. Basically, that's what this movie's kind of getting at. And at the end, they kind of say this was going to happen no matter what.
Right.
But is that true or not? And is the sacrifice of this one individual who chooses initially to do it because she loves the people around her and she thinks it's the right thing to do, is that the best thing to happen? Is like sacrificing the one for the many.
I don't really know how I feel about the concept of sacrificing one for the many, but what I was thinking about as you were talking about this whole sacrifice theme is that, one, I think it does make a difference after the sacrifice, because I mean it was very obvious in the movie that her sacrifice led to the weather becoming normal again in Tokyo, and it was like all sunshine and daisies from then out. And as soon as she gave up on that sacrifice, she like reversed the sacrifice because she wanted to come back. Essentially the good weather went away and the crazy storm came back. So her sacrifice did make a difference, but I think the more important question is the result of your sacrifice, so that end result that you would get out of your sacrifice, is that really what the people who matter want out of you? Because sure, for the people of Tokyo, they're like, oh, we don't want rain anymore, like just make it go away, we want sunshine, and we don't want Tokyo to be like 30 feet underwater. Sure, but those are just randos in Tokyo. But the people who are closest to you, like her younger brother Nagisa or Nagi, and this guy, forgot his name, Hokada. Think about how those people feel if you're just sacrificing yourself so that, oh, this is what everyone wants, I'll just like give into it and I won't be around anymore because of it. It's like, sure, we'll get sunny skies, and I think one of the best scenes in the film is related to this point. It's like they get sunny skies, but what they really want is for you to be there. And they could care less about whether or not Tokyo experiences continuous rain, is 30 feet underwater. They just want you to be there with them. So I don't know. I don't know if I care maybe I'm just selfish. I don't know if I care too much about like sacrificing one for the good of the many. It's just that we'll survive. Like everyone will survive up to a certain point. And does it really matter that you've sacrificed yourself if the people that matter the most to you are essentially unhappy with the outcome? Of course, this is like very dependent on the situation.
Yeah.
There are many situations in which perhaps the sacrifice of one could benefit many people, and that would be the correct choice. But I think in this situation, it just like, it doesn't make any sense.
And we also have to think, like, is she the first weather maiden to choose not to sacrifice herself?
I don't know.
Because
I don't know.
While
I guess.
while we are talking about climate change and that things are hard to reverse, you know, the counter arguments like, oh, this just happens every 10,000 years. And we just don't know that because history or weather reporting only dates back, and they even say this in the movie, like 100 years. Like, this has happened before. So it's the idea of, oh, this is really bad right now, but would eventually Tokyo return to, like, would the water evaporate or all that stuff? So
maybe they go through like a couple centuries of eternal sunshine and all the water dries out because it's just never raining.
Yeah.
That would cause other problems, obviously. But like, either way, like maybe it's just a constant cycle.
And that's why I think they were getting at, like, this was going to happen no matter what. In the
Near the end of the movie, I think they were trying to appease the audience to be like, hey, it's fine that she didn't sacrifice herself. You know, she gets to be happy with everyone, and the end result, it's where we were headed anyway.
I really like that they made that choice, that she didn't end up sacrificing herself, or like went back on. He brought her back basically, and they had to deal with these
also for me it's
consequences.
just like, ugh, that is some hot BS. How did she go and sacrifice herself, and then the god just let this little kid through, clearly knowing that he is about to take away the sacrifice maiden,
maybe,
and then be like, it's fine, just let her go. I'll just make it rain again. It's cool.
Maybe
I won't close off that gate.
Maybe
It's
the
open
god
forever.
is really, he's like really about like that free choice aspect. So she
True.
was looking like she was going through the point of sacrificing with all the birds around her, or was it fish? I'm gonna say it again.
Waterfish.
So waterfish, and then he came like at the right time to like remove her.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's like the sacrifice only works if it is freely or willingly given.
I just don't think the gods would be that merciful and be like, oh, you know what? Once you've made your decision, you can go back on it at any given time, should you choose to do so. I'm like, come on, gods. Please be more strict in your rules.
Okay.
I'm glad it happened in the movie. Like, I'm glad she was able to come back, especially for Nagi, because that kid has a special place in my heart.
Oh my goodness. Didn't think he would, honestly. As a character, I'm like this playboy character.
Ugh.
He was so endearing, and his humor was good, and the bond between him and his sister was really, really good. But
I just wanted to, because it's very related to what we're talking about with the sacrifice, or kind of related to that, but it made me think of people who choose to commit suicide. So I think people choose to end their own lives often for their own feelings. Like sometimes it's just really hard to handle certain situations, or they feel like they've lost their way, or there's nothing to live for, which is not really the case in Weathering with You. She has a very clear purpose for sacrificing herself, which is not the same as suicide, but like who really knows what happens after you sacrifice yourself? So in that way, it's kind of parallel to choosing to commit suicide. But I think what I felt about it was that you choose to commit suicide, and that affects you in a very, very deterministic way, because you're ending your own life and your own feelings. But then that also leaves the people around you to deal with many other feelings because of your choice. So I think we saw that a lot in the movie, where her younger brother and her new soulmate, whatever you want to call him, Hikato, and Nagi, I think they're not able to accept the fact that she has sacrificed herself, and they're so distraught, and it's so painful for them to think of her as just being gone. I think those are very real feelings that I think family members or friends or partners experience if someone close to them has decided to end their life. You're kind of potentially in a much more restful state now, but the people around you now have to deal with the result of your choice. It's like a very dark topic to think about, but I think the emotions were there in the movie.
Yeah.
Because Hikaru was like just not dealing with it.
No.
He was just like, I need to bring this bitch back. How dare she?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Nagi was like, bring her back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting, yeah.
Those are my thoughts surrounding the whole sacrifice situation.
It's an interesting take, and I, totally see it.
So after that rather dark and depressing talk, we're going to switch gears a bit.
Before we end the episode, because we are going to have to do a two-parter, I want to talk about the voice acting, particularly with, one, all the characters and all the movies. I applaud them. They all feel very distinct with their choices that they make. And granted, a lot of it is obviously animation, but that would obviously take away too much, I think, from the voice acting. Voice acting is very specific. Sometimes it frustrates me that movies nowadays just kind of put in big star names because they want the draw. And not that they're bad, because I think they're still actors, so they can still get that across. But voice acting is a very particular kind of acting, and there's people who can do so many different voices, but those voices don't feel like a gimmick or something put on. It feels very much what the character is. So with that said, in Your Name, whenever we have in TV shows where you have to act like the other person, it's always about mannerisms. And obviously the animation covers that, but I was noticing on rewatches that it's also in like their voice acting. So anytime that Mitsuha went over to Taki, there was like almost like a lilt, or just like her ending of the phrases always kind of ends breathy or airy, but that was very like a Mitsuha thing. And just also, she does go, when she is in Taki's voice, talking in the sense that like a little bit octave higher, I find, or like higher there. So there's just little things there. And then when the male voice actor was in Mitsuha's body, it was
/ the female voice actor acting as Taki in Mitsuha's body.
Sorry, no, but he was also doing it like, it was lower a bit, but again, it was more direct talking.
Yeah, a bit more forceful.
That's who Taki is, and he's very much like, this is how I see things, this is how I'm gonna act, and that comes across when he goes to talk to the mayor.
Yeah.
Her dad, and her dad notices that this isn't Mitsuha, and I think that you can tell that in the voice as well as the animation. But
it's because Matsuha's she's a bit of a people pleaser and a little bit of a pushover, and she's much softer, like the very stereotypical Japanese high school girl, where Taki is a very stereotypical, almost like borderline Japanese delinquent high schooler, but he's still obviously dedicated to like what he's supposed to be doing. So the contrast in personalities also came through when they switched bodies, which I think is super well done, because it's like, it's one thing to have the character perform actions that are very suited to the other one that they're switching with, but to have the voice inflections also change, it's just a really good touch.
And I'm just going to focus on those two, while I do think every character in both movies, really well done. I love the little sister, Mitsuha's sister, Yotsuha, and she's great.
Adorable.
And the personality just comes through their voice as well as the animation. But yes. Okay.
I did have one note to say about the voice acting, which I found to be excellent. In basically almost all animals. In almost all animes of all time, there's always this one supporting cast character who has an animated voice that is like 15 octaves higher than all the other female voices. And I'm just so tired of it, because it almost breaks your involvement in the anime or the film, because it's just like, it's so jarring. The voice is so jarring, and for comedies, sure, it sometimes makes sense, but I think for these films where comedy isn't the main idea, having a supporting character with that kind of voice would have really detracted from it, and they did not do that
in either movie.
In either of the movies, everyone had a very normal, stable voice that was not overly done, and the way that they were speaking, there were some little dialect things that were going on, but no one was like ending every single sentence that they said in like desu or other mannerisms that would have been very annoying to watch. So that was one thing that I really enjoyed that they did not do for this film.
And they didn't need the comedy in that because
No.
they had the comedy throughout in other
They
aspects.
did comedy in other better ways.
Which we'll probably touch on when we go into our favorite moments from
Yeah.
each movie. So we're gonna close this episode, part 1. Thank you for listening to this episode of Nudity. If you want to listen to our other episodes, you can find us anywhere where you listen to your podcast, most likely. And if you want to watch them, Wendy video edits on the YouTube channel, and you can find us at just type in Nudity Podcast, and we also have an Instagram at that name.
All right, on to part 2. Bye.
Bye.